Everybody was getting a little restless in the background. I was going to say, make some comments about him getting restless, but I don't want to get Gruden, right?
I mean, Ashley, I guarantee you, if we pulled up some of your old block emails, that we would be able to get you. Yeah, I guarantee we could find something on you.
Yeah, be careful. Somebody probably has those somewhere.
The funny thing is he rather than stick around and fight, for his job, he's just like, yeah, whatever. I got so much dang money. I'm just gonna go home and go fishing. See you guys.
Or he'll end up on Barstool Sports. Who knows, man? Right? I mean,
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I think he did the smart thing. I think just disappearing and resigning and keep your mouth shut. I mean, some of the stuff he said wasn't very bright. So it's like,
absolutely.
hey, you're gonna sit there and try to defend yourself. You got caught red-handed with your fingers in the cookie jar. Either you come up with a bunch of lame excuses for it, or you just disappear for a while.
I mean, but like, what percentage of the of the sports, male over 40 or any age, hasn't been like some locker room type talk that's inappropriate.
We've all said stupid things, but that's different than putting out an email and sending it to somebody, right? I mean, like, I don't know about you, Greg, but in my professional career, ever since I started doing this, I try to reread almost every single email that I've ever sent to make sure that I don't say anything that's like completely over the top, out of line. And I've made a few mistakes over the years, but I'll tell you, one guy, Mark Porter, gave me a really good piece of advice one time. I was really mad at somebody. A reload lost some wood or something, and I was going to fire off a nasty gram to the owner of the reload. And I gave a copy of it to Porter. I said, "Hey, can I send this? I'm all mad." And he's like, "Oh God, no! Don't send this." And then he told me, he says, "Hey, if you want to send effective emails, reread it and take all the emotion out of it." Yeah. It's actually really good advice. Really good advice.
The other thing is, you should never say or send anything when you're angry.
Yeah.
Right? And my general feeling is on those situations, aren't you better to pick up the phone? I mean, I've had this discussion with one of my daughters who she was having there was some situation, and she was saying so-and-so, sent me a text, and then she sent this text, then she said this text. I said, if you're going back and forth on text,
right,
you lose a lot of context that way. And, I find that people feel that they can say things in an email or in a text that they wouldn't say on the phone, and certainly wouldn't say to your face.
If you want lumber claims to go sideways, try to settle them on a text or email.
Oh,
I think text is the worst possible way to convey emotion that we have in modern society. And I think it's a horrible way to communicate with people other than just names, places, and facts. So like, I'll be there at 4 is a good text, right? Or what is the address of this place I'm supposed to be at? But trying to have an intellectual discussion with somebody via text, it doesn't work. You got to pick up the phone and call them, or you got to go sit down over a cup of coffee and have that conversation.
All right, my producer is telling me to reel this conversation in.
What? You were on a roll.
Yeah, so my producer Nick is telling me to reel this in.
Talking about so Nick's bored with this conversation because he's done it. Because he's done it.
No, we don't want to. We want to bring this in. So anyway, we started a little late. Dustin Gelbert is going to join us. I'm sure I butchered that name. I will have him pronounce it when he comes in from RISI Fast Markets. He's an economist with RISI, and you've seen him featured in tons of publications over the last year, multiple ones. So real quick, I just want to talk. We had a great little show just chatting about stuff, taking out the political stuff beforehand. Crazy market, Greg. Let's go in real quick and talk about a few market things. So we've seen a big run up in futures over the last 2 to 3 weeks. Basis is out there, but you brought up a good point about basis, that little tidbit you learned, which I actually wrote down because it's pretty good. Tell us what you said on that one.
So, I mean, lots of conversation and, confusion. How can futures be $150, $200 over the cash market. And, so somebody brought up, we talk about it. The long-term historical average range during the year, annual range, is $130, was $130 prior to the last year. And we used to look at $30 of basis as being, hey, that's kind of that's a great number. $30 is 23%. This year we've had a $1,200 range. 23% is $276.
That makes a lot. That puts it into perspective very, very well, right?
I mean, that's one way. That's one way to look at it. I mean, another way to look at it is the average price was $350, and $30 is 8%. If we look at right now, the average price of lumber this year is probably closer to $800. So maybe $80 is a more reasonable number to think about for a normal basis.
There you go. So kind of jumping onto that, I was just at the BCMC show, and before that, the same time frame, I was at the Framers Summit, where all these big framers are there and builders. And I will tell you a couple of highlights that I saw, and it kind of goes to what we talked about in this conversation, is oh my gosh, are there a lot of people that have never bought and stored lumber before, buying and storing lumber now? You know how we kind of talked about this 6 months ago, about this phantom inventory and all this? There's a lot more people doing it than I really thought. And I sat next to them and talked to them over the last week. And they're like, yeah, we never really bought lumber before, but we decided to internalize it. And we either bought a warehouse or we're using these things called reloads now. Have you heard of them? And we're putting lumber there. And I just tried to
are these people related to the lumber business at all? Or are they just like a guy with some money that just wants to blow it?
No. So I don't know if there's any of those people. These are people that were 2 or 3 touches away from lumber that have now decided, hey, I'm
like the framers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they're putting wood. So what I'm seeing, just my opinion, what I see, can only say what I see, is there's people putting wood on the ground for jobs that are sold and stuffing these reloads full of wood that traditionally didn't have the same people using them before. At the same time, some of the people that sell these same people are putting wood in the ground. Am I missing something here? Is that what
No, you're exactly right. And what happened was last year, about this time, in the fourth quarter of 2020, several of the large distributors and wholesale outfits that sell those customers, the people that you're talking about, kind of backed out on them, said, hey, we're not going to honor these quotes in the first or second quarter.
Force majeure, they use the force majeure, not knowing the true definition of that, basically I can't cover.
Yeah, they backed out of some commitments, and they also told people, hey, we won't sell you on a fixed price unless we have it booked with a sawmill backing it up, right?
Yeah.
So because everybody was so nervous about the risk of higher prices, and so people made these determinations that would be the safest way to run their business for this year. Well, that put a whole bunch of these customers like out in the cold. Like, hey, how am I going to get my lumber? For 6 months, they sat around from January until June of last year. They sat around and watched the price of lumber go up to a record high price.
Yep.
And they're all trying to figure out, how am I going to get my lumber? And they finally figured out how to get their lumber was to just go figure out how to set up some of their own supplier relationships and buy it directly or buy it through another wholesale company.
Yep.
And that's what they've done. So they got a huge chance reprieve in June, July, and August and September of this year to now come in with their new purchasing power and flex their muscles, at much lower prices than what they were facing in the first 2 quarters of the year. And they've done that. So what we've done is sort of rejiggered the dominoes of how our lumber gets moved around this country.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's a permanent change. I don't think it's going to be a temporary change. I think these people have figured out I can have a little bit more control over my own future going forward.
And Matt, some of these framers I talk to buy there's some of them are framing 1 million square feet a year. Some of them are framing 10 million square feet a year. I mean, they're buying straight trucks of lumber every day. Like one guy I was talking to buys 6 trucks of 2x4 14s and like 10 trucks of 3/4 and 7/16 OSB every day. Before, he used to buy it through retail yards and everything, and they figured out, hey, we've got a lot of buying power here, and we're going as far to the tips as we can on this. And I think this is a great point, Matt. You brought it home. This is a permanent change that we're seeing, and it's going to affect the supply chain a little, and maybe affect 3 months down the road if there's going to be more of a pull, because we're building inventory right now. Greg, what do you think on that?
Well, I think there's no question that the pipeline is building inventory. To Matt's point is, one of the things that tipped the market back in May was a substantial amount of business being delayed. We had the discussion. I mean, there was slabs poured and projects were ready to go, but the pricing was so far out of budget that it got delayed. That stuff started getting placed in August, and then the people that were looking at October, November, December, first quarter of next year, they looked at the pricing and said, hey, we don't want to be in the same situation we were in earlier this year. We're going to buy all this lumber, which is why now we have reloads all over the country that are jam full of lumber and are embargoed or not accepting new shipments from new people. So, I mean, I guess it's a great time to be a lumber reloader.
Yeah. It's part of the reason. It's not the whole reason. The other side of that is the massive transportation issues that we're having in this country that you and I were speaking about before the show. So if you want to talk about that now, that kind of ties in with this whole
tie it in, Matt, and then
Greg, take it away. You had some relevant information about your East Coast business, and then I'll finish with my thoughts on it.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll say is that it's really frustrating as a distributor. Matt and I were talking. Our business has always been built on, hey, we carry a lot of inventory. For years I was like, I can ship in 24 to 48 hours. Now I have 2 weeks worth of orders on the board to ship. Prompt lumber, I have it sitting on the ground. I'm quoting 2 or 3 weeks out, depending on where it's going, and I have it physically on the ground.
Yep, there's several things going on right now in this country, transportation wise. You read about it with the port problems, and I saw some little bit of news yesterday about the Port of Savannah having 88,000 containers just sitting there not moving anywhere. I don't know if that's true or not. I didn't even read the whole article, but I saw a little report like that. I know that Long Beach and Houston and other ports are having their own issues. I have material in Houston right now that I'm dealing with, so I'm well aware of what's going on in the ports. But what's also going on is trucking, and it has nothing to do with the ports, right? There's a shortage of truckers. There's a shortage of employees that are working at these reloads, right? I mean, people have quit, or they got COVID, or they went and got a different job. Being a reload worker may or may not be your career, right? It might just be a stepping stone. So, and then we have a problem with employment in this country anyhow. I mean, that's why almost every business that you see has a help wanted sign out. So I don't think this problem is going to get any better anytime soon. But I'm at the point now where I'm quoting people, I'll ship it when able.
Yeah.
I'm not even committing.
Well, you're not even putting a week on it. It's like, yeah,
I was entertaining this for up until about a week and a half ago. I was getting phone calls from people. Hey, if I buy this on Monday, will you get it there by Friday? And I'd make 4 or 5 phone calls and I'd dial it all in. And even then, truckers would cancel, or the reload guys wouldn't load the trucks because they wanted to close for the day, whatever. I can only have so many excuses how I didn't perform my job correctly.
Yeah, it's not the way you ran your business before.
So now I just say I'll ship it when able.
Yeah.
And it might be 3 weeks. It might be 1 day. But I'm not going to commit. And this is the first time in my 27 years of doing this that I've been in this position where I had to tell people I'll ship when able.
And they're
getting still worse. Buying it.
Yeah, this is getting worse, not better, right? I mean,
it's getting a lot worse to the point where it actually concerns me about, not just lumber, but everything. Like the stuff that you're going to go buy at Costco after the show. How's it going to move around if nobody's working, or nobody's, got the truck capacity to move freight? It's a problem. We have a problem.
Well, let's
Matt,
yeah,
you did a road trip. When you were out on that road trip, what were the roads like? Did you see many trucks on the road?
I'll tell you this: after dusk every evening, if you're driving from say 6 p.m. on, it was all trucks. I mean, it's 90% trucks on the interstates and 10% passenger cars. During the day, it's like, your normal everyday commute. You probably have like 70% mom and pa driving around and then 30% over the road truckers. But at night in this country, if you guys want to see something interesting, hop on Interstate 15 or I-10 or I-84 or whatever interstate you got running through your country, your little area at about 9 o'clock at night, and just drive around for a while and see what you see. You'll see nothing but semi trucks.
Yeah, that's a great point. We saw, like, literally when we drove to the BCMC between Chicago and Omaha, early morning, late at night coming back. I mean,
Yep.
semis lined up and down 80 going everywhere, and
Yep.
all different. And it's funny. We had Ryan's one of our new team members here. We were pointing to him, drop trucks and loads of lumber and flats, and there was just a ton of lumber floating around. Right? It was crazy. Well, cool. So I know there's a lot of other interesting trends to talk about, but one of the factors was, let's not forget this. The theme at the BCMC is we have great business. We are sold out 6 months. We are telling our salespeople to push the clutch in on some sales. The only downside, labor. Labor is tough everywhere because people are not going around for $2 or $3. They're moving for 50 cents. Some of these people were saying, right? Which is crazy. So you need to keep your labor force. In jobs that they thought were going to start on time in certain places, don't because of some variable, and they got to quickly flex and ship to another job, which creates all kinds of uncertainty. But business is great, but there are so many variables that are in play now, as with anything going great, but they're different, and everybody's trying to manage those, right? So I think to keep this thing moving, we're going to bring Dustin in right now from RISI, introduce him, and we're going to chat a little bit about the world that he lives in. Hey, Dustin, how are you?
Hey, Ashley, good. Thanks to you and the gang at Materials Exchange for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
I appreciate that, man. Did I butcher your name? Is it Gelbert?
It's fine. I take all pronunciations. I say Jalbert, it's French Canadian, but I take Jalbert. Anything you throw at me, I'll just nod my head and say yeah.
I was so off, man. Jalbert. All right, well, great.
It's fine. You're fine.
You weren't even close, Ashley. Way to go, buddy.
I shouldn't have even tried. But look at so Dustin, I've known you for a long time. Dustin's a great guy. RISI, Fastmarkets. They own Random Lengths. What is your official title, Dustin, at Fastmarkets?
So I work as a senior economist on the wood product side. And I specifically cover softwood lumber, but I've been doing forest products for almost a decade now. I started on the pulp and paper side of our business, and I've been doing lumber specifically for the last 4 years or so.
So, man, I got to tell you, I see your name in every single really good news article that comes out, and you do a great job because it's got to be first of all, it's tough managing numbers, right, and putting out just economic facts on things in a volatile market because things change every second, right? So tell us a little bit about what your last year was like, some cool things about it, and just how many times you get pinged a day just to be on publications and how you handle it.
Yeah, I mean, half of the battle of doing this type of work, right, being a business economist, we do some forecasting, but the most of our work is really rationalizing and sifting through data and trying to figure out what makes sense and what doesn't, right? Sometimes you get data points and, this is the official statistic, but you go and, you have to go out and corroborate that out in the market. And that's a lot of what we do. We go talk to people. We try to make sense of what, is the data kind of reflecting what's going on in the market, and if not, what's going on there, right? So, I mean, it's been a tough year to forecast, right? I mean, you put your forecast out a week later, and it's like, okay, market conditions have changed again. What's going on here? But yeah, I mean, it's been a wild year for the industry in general, right? I mean, in a normal year, in terms of what we would get for inquiries from the press and things like that, it's maybe 1 or 2 inquiries a year that we get.
Yeah.
And, when we're talking, April and May, kind of the peak of lumber mania, I mean, we were getting, a couple inquiries a week, if not more. It was just, it's not what we're used to, right? Fielding these kinds of sort of media opportunities, but it's been a fun year to cover the industry. There's no doubt about that.
So real quick, tell us a little bit about Random Lengths. How many, I mean, you guys, the one thing I don't think people realize is, I mean, you have a methodology to how you do things, and you have a lot of data points. Kind of, could you tell people what your methodology is, and how many data points are you guys collecting weekly? Or if you can tell.
Well, there's a pretty distinct wall between the economic analysis side and the editorial price reporting side. But we have a team of half a dozen editors that go out and they poll the market, and they obviously go poll buyers and sellers, and obviously there's some prices that it's a much more liquid, much larger market, so they get a lot more. And then there's some that are smaller and that require maybe a little bit more judgment, but they're obviously they're pretty sort of open book about how they approach things. So they're always getting feedback from the market, and they're always open to sort of discussion if there's a disagreement out there about an assessment or anything like that. So it makes sense. You have a little wall between you. So what is your day like then, and what do you touch on a daily basis in your economic world you're living in forest products? Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously looking at all the daily releases, the major data points, housing starts, existing home sales. Kind of the big macro, sort of data points, mortgage rates, a lot of those things feed through our, demand model in particular. And then obviously the supply side is a lot of industry related data, the WWPA data that gets reported sort of weekly or monthly. I'm constantly looking at that. I mean, this year too, just given how fast the market has moved, we've kind of moved towards trying to find more high frequency measures. I mean, I'm looking at everything from rail shipment data to I'm actually a big fan of Google search data. I think that's there's actually a lot of cool insights that you can find there. And, one of the charts I sent over in particular was on this sort of DIY boom, right? And that, there's some pretty interesting insights you can gather from there. But yeah, it's pouring through data, doing, monthly we do our forecasts. So you want to go to
I figured we just pulled up your so basically surging new home sales and the home improvement boom. Is that the one that you were talking about?
In terms of the Google search trends, if you go a couple down, it might be the third or fourth one. Oh, actually, it's right there.
That's the one.
So this is something we started tracking when we started hearing that really what was driving lumber demand, even in the summer when kind of housing starts took a little bit of a plunge last year, is really that the home centers are really driving a lot of the volume, right? And it's the repair and remodeling side in general is a tough sector to track, but it is the largest sort of end use market for lumber consumption in North America. So we started looking at searches. You can see here, build a deck or build a porch, and when you look at 2020. Interest just soared, right? And it's clearly a reflection of people were stuck at home, stimulus checks in hand, not spending on the service side of the economy so much, and they pivoted a lot of that money into their homes, right? So, some of that's come off this year, but it's been a pretty good little indicator for us to kind of just track interest on that.
One of the things that I noticed when I looked at this chart, which Ashley shared with me yesterday, was it's a very clear seasonal on the build a deck where, it starts rising in the first quarter, peaks in the second quarter. And then going back in all these years, it seems pretty consistent that it doesn't bottom out until really the end of the calendar year. Yet I'm looking at this year and it's already bottomed out and moving higher.
Yeah.
And,
good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you see it in other kind of sources of data. When you look at, say, the WWPA, they have some weekly order data. you are seeing a bounce back of ordering after this kind of lull that we had in the summer months. And it does sound like, the traffic through the home centers and the volumes are starting to pick up again. And I think that's part of the reason you're getting some support out in the market on the pricing front.
Yeah, absolutely, Dustin. This is cool because we were at a panel at the BCMC show, and they had five industry expert up there. They did a great job. Mike from our company asked him, "What indicator do you look at, like, to check on price moves?" And people were like, they kind of looked at each other at first, right? Because this is a good reason why they can look at some of your data, because it's hard. It's like herding cats trying to get into industry data in this forest products market, right? And this, I'm a big fan of Google Trends and Google things. I keep lumber futures open and everything else where I see how many times people ping lumber prices. It's interesting what you can harvest out of here and glean out of here. I really think that's great.
Sure.
What give us another chart we should go to kind of talk about? Heard a little about what we were talking about coming into this. What another chart we could go to maybe give some people some tidbits of what they're seeing and what's going forward here?
Well, yeah, maybe we can go up to the inventory chart, that sort of deficit of production versus demand, and then to the right there's the months of supply chart. So I think if you go, there you go, this guy right here. So you guys are talking about inventory, right? And so to the right here in the purple line, that is our estimate of months of supply of lumber inventory in the U.S. at the wholesale and retail level. And this data, it's a little dated. It's only out to, I think, May or June. So, to your point, obviously when we look at where we started 2021, right, we feel like there was a pretty big, inventory depletion that happened throughout the market, right, that really contributed to a lot of the volatility. It does sound like now in recent months, though, there's been a slew of buying. You mentioned the reloads being full. It's a little harder to assess where the retail side is, but I do suspect, the market is starting to rebalance a bit here. But part of that, too, is demand has come off, right? So when you think about, a metric like months of supply, there's the numerator, which is the inventory side, and the denominator, which is demand. And demand has clearly come off, too. So it's a question of how much of that sort of bounce in sort of months of supply is a demand component versus how much is a big boost in the actual physical inventory volumes out of the market. But certainly that's contributed to volatility for sure this year on the pricing front.
That's a great point. And before you heard us, and when you were in the back room, there's a lot of non-traditional people buying lumber now, like kind of phantom inventory. Which is something maybe that needs to be monitored, because a lot of that inventory sitting there is from framers that have never really bought inventory before, right? Which is interesting. But you said something. Demand is coming down. How do we? When you're sitting there and I'm looking at it, is that demand that is completions, or is there pent up demand? Because what we always see is we want to build 1.7 million houses, but we can only complete 1.3. Right, so demand is falling because of variables we can't control, or the unknowns. Is that maybe an explanation, or am I off there?
Yeah, I mean, so it's when I think of demand, at least how we measure it, when you look at, say, the red bar on the chart to the left, that is our own Fastmarkets estimate of actual finally consumed lumber. So it's not apparent demand from shipments or orders or anything like that. It's actually what we think. Like you said, completions is a good example on the new construction side. So that piece obviously right now is getting bogged down by, obviously field consumption is down because of all the supply chain issues you guys talked about, right? For builders, it's not so much on the wood product side, at least for sheathing and lumber, but getting windows, getting siding, getting LVL beams, all that stuff is, these kind of, complementary goods you need to finish a home are bogged down, and that's affecting, people are just not framing as quickly, everything's bogged down. The build time for a single family home is, gone from, instead of 6 to 7 months, is maybe 8-9 months. And from a field consumption standpoint, that bogs down demand, and I think there's similar reasons on the R&R side. Some of that too is, DIY is coming off, but even on your kind of pro side, for your professional contractors, there's a pretty deep pool of demand there. but they're dealing with supply chain issues too, and getting some of these projects completed for homeowners. So that is dampening field consumption.
Here's a great point. I love hammering this home, and every time you say this to somebody, even when they've been in the industry for a long time, I think most people get it now, but repair and remodel is the single largest end user for softwood lumber. When you tell people that at first, they think, what? I thought new home construction was. It's not. Maybe you can speak to this a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little counterintuitive. Obviously, new home construction is kind of the sexier market data, and it's a little bit more clear, right? There's a pretty defined data point out there: housing starts, housing completions, permits. So you take that, you take the square footage. It's pretty, I don't want to say easy, but you can kind of derive a pretty, good back of the napkin estimate of what lumber consumption is from that. But when you look at the whole market, there's a whole area of this repair and remodeling piece, both the professional contractor side and the DIY side, that are huge. And some of that is kind of a fallout too of the recession, right? You can see back before 2010, repair and remodeling was a smaller share of total demand. And obviously as new construction came off, when the housing bubble popped, new construction's share dropped dramatically. But, the repair and remodeling side kind of stuck with, particularly you think about the repair side, it's less discretionary. People are going to still sort of, hurricane damage repair, things like that. People are still going to be rebuilding. And that share has just continued to stay strong, even as new construction has recovered. And part of that too is just there's not enough inventory out in the market. So people are investing in their existing homes instead, putting additions on. They've got tons of home equity right now. So that continues to be a strong part of the market and will be outsized for a long time, I think.
Dustin, isn't one of the big factors that drives that is the average age of the housing stock? Obviously you look at 15 years, you went from 38 and 34 to 45 and 27. That's basically 50, almost 15 years of underbuilding what we've needed for housing. The average age of the stock has grown and leads to more need.
You have, the value of homes is so much higher now. It used to be you buy a house for $100,000. Houses were almost like Gillette razors. You could just swap one for another and it was not that big of a deal. Now it's like, you're talking, what's the average home price in the Chicago area? 700, 600, something like that. It's got to be a big number.
No, Chicagoland has not participated in the real estate boom of the rest of the country, Matt. Let's
say Portland. Portland's like
for real estate for the last 20 years. Ask Ashley and I.
Yeah.
Come on.
Except Greg, what's yours? About 4 to 5 million now?
Only if I built it in Matt's neighborhood.
And Matt, you and Dustin have not switched out a Gillette razor in quite a while.
No, but homes used to be so much more, so much less of a major financial decision compared to what they are now, right? So the other thing
I think they've always been the biggest financial decision that anybody ever makes. I think you're addressing, Matt, maybe that's more talking about affordability, which continues. And I don't know if Dustin has a chart on affordability that he wants to share, but that's one thing that's continued to fall. And it's also why you've had this big explosion of growth of home rentals. You've got all these major businesses now that not only, they started buying houses when the financial crisis hit, but now they're buying whole subdivisions that the major builders are building just to rent them.
Hmm.
Yeah, I want to bring up one thing here too. We're gonna switch to another one. So one thing we always talk about, Dust, on the show is what's the cost of production. Well, interesting thing, I saw an article yesterday that finally log costs are going up in the South for once, right? So the log costs for a long time. Yeah, there was an article on how log costs are actually going up, right? But we always have this debate conversation on what is the actual price in BC and in the cost. And this is a kind of a cool chart if you can kind of speak to that.
Yeah, sure, certainly. And this, this just looks at our estimates for the average variable production costs for the BC interior. So that's the sort of the red part of the bar. And then, this is assumed for production shipped to the U.S. So, we tack on what our estimate of the duty impact is. And, that is a cost to the producers, right? So you can get an implied sort of break even, right? And you look here and, break evens, over the last year or two before, what we're looking at, say, Q3, Q4, have kind of been in that 300 to say 450, maybe even close to 500 per thousand range. But really, when you look at what's going on with log costs in British Columbia, I think now we're at over 1,000 Canadian per cube, which is basically tripled, or that's what it is for Q4, tripled since Q1. And you tack on, you've got the duties going to be probably increasing from 9%, combined to 18% by the end of Q4, based on the sort of the Department of Commerce's sort of preliminary determination. That's going to be a huge sort of increase in that translates to a huge increase in production costs for BC. And, we know that, Western SPF 2x4s are, just shy of, I think, 600 per thousand right now, or somewhere around there. So, there's still a lot of mills that are basically just breaking even right now out of the market. And the situation's going to, be even tougher by the end of the year with assuming the duties go through, and the log costs are definitely going up. They've already been sort of set by the province based on that, market pricing system they have. So
can we make a comment about like the insanity of, given the current environment, like increasing the duty on Canadian lumber? Can we just talk about it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to tread lightly here.
Insanity.
Well, no, I'm going to tread lightly here, but I mean, certainly in an environment like you said, where you've got inflation is surging, material costs are up.
Transitory, come on, transitory inflation.
Yeah,
it's not the big I inflation. It's just transitory.
The Fed is probably going to kind of take that term, crumple it up and throw it out of its vocabulary. Because I don't think it resonates well with the public. So, but.
I mean, at what point, and I guess until it happens, they're going to have to drastically increase interest rates at some point in time as this inflation continues to build. It's not transitory, it's real, and it's building through the system. It's not going to go away anytime soon. So, that's kind of my wild card, is at what point do they have to overshoot, because they're like, oh shoot, we can't have 6 and 8% inflation annualized. What are we at now? 5.2? I think this morning.
Yeah, I think we're knocking around there annualized for sure. I mean, I think there's some goods that you will see at least the rate of inflation soften a bit, but I think a lot of people have been surprised how persistent we've seen prices go up for a lot of goods, right? And I mean, you have a perfect storm where demand has held up, and part of that is just there's been a historic amount of stimulus in the economy that has supported households, but on this supply side, we have a negative supply shock across pretty much all goods sectors, right? And you guys are talking about it. On the shipping side, that's a huge issue across the supply chain. Manufacturing's had trouble keeping people. There's a kind of a race to the bottom is not the right word, but you've got, Amazon raising wages, Walmart raising wages, kind of pulling employees from other sectors, making it hard for manufacturers in other parts of, the economy to ramp up production if everyone's competing for a smaller labor.
We're getting into that cycle, that inflationary cycle, because it's leapfrog, right? And I mean, I don't know if you know the exact amount of, the $6 trillion of stimulus that we've had in the last 18 months. How much of that still is yet to be spent? Last thing I heard, it's almost a third of it still hasn't even been spent. There's hundreds of millions and billions of dollars that is just sitting, waiting to continue to go out into the system. I mean, that.
It's so the number.
We're talking about adding another 6 or 8 or 10 trillion to that.
Right.
I've always felt like the lumber business. I've told my friends and family over the years that whatever's going on in lumber's a primary indicator of economic conditions in this country. It happens first in lumber, and then it happens in the wider economy. You see that with recessions, but you're also now seeing it in the flip side. We had a massive inflation spike in lumber, a year ago, right? A year and a half ago. And so now the rest of the economy is starting to go through this same thing that we've already seen. Have you, in your whole life, did you expect lumber to get to 17, 1800, something like that? Like we saw, we actually just went through that whole period of time. So don't tell me that it's not possible to happen in the rest of the economy, because I know it is, right? I mean, you're seeing it in used cars now, just finding parts for cars, new cars. I mean, just everything that you want to buy is going to cost you more. And then the more people sense that there's shortages of product, the more they're going to front run, and they're going to go load up their pantries, and they're going to go spend the money now instead of waiting until later. And then you want to add to that by giving stimulus money to the rest of the world to go spend even more money. I mean, we got to just, let's put a stop to this for a second, and everybody take a deep breath. Is kind of how I feel.
Matt, one of my reloads was talking about, forklifts. And, he said, oh, yeah, the average age of our forklifts is, 6 years old. I go, yeah, that's like right about the time where you need to replace it. He goes, yeah, but we went to order more, and they said it's 12 months to get a new forklift.
Yep.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, if anybody has any questions for Dustin, let him know. Otherwise, I know all your Matt, Gregg, and Dustin, your time is valuable with Dustin. It was great having you on the program today, and we'd like to have you come back and do this again, because I think it's a completely different perspective. But how would you wrap it up with what maybe you see going forward, and maybe some unknowns are out there, or something that you can leave everybody with a little bit to come back with?
Yeah, I mean, I just think in general, one of you guys mentioned this earlier, that I think a lot of end users and buyers out there, lived in a sort of a paradigm where they assumed lumber and wood products is just a cheap and abundant, commodity, and that, didn't have to kind of worry about it. And the number of end users I've started to hear from, asking about it, purchasing managers, even outside of home construction, think about pallets, things like that, crating. I think there's just a different mindset now, and to the point you guys made, I think people are going out and trying to secure their own lumber now, and figuring out their own supply chain solutions instead of depending on, those traditional channels. And that is creating volatility in the market. So, I think, there's going to be more volatility going forward on the pricing front. All this channel shifting is going to make it challenging. We have the supply side issues we talked about, especially in DC. I don't think we're going back to 1,500 per thousand board feet, but I think we're going to see a much wider range of pricing going forward.
I appreciate that, Dustin. Matt, Gregg, as always, great program. I get a lot of great feedback on this, but from all of you guys, and I got to send Dustin a Materials Exchange mug too. Cheers. Gregg's got the Starbucks mug rocking.
Dustin, it's great having you. Thanks so much. And I love, I'm a chart guy, so anytime you have any charts, send them my way. I love them.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure to talk to you guys. So great show.
Appreciate it, guys. Stay on, or come on tomorrow at Thursday. We've got lunch with Lumberman at 12 o'clock, and then our Friday Smart Market we also have on Friday. So good talking, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.